So I just don't see that there's racism when a member of the royal family thought, oh, I wonder what he's going to look like. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to wonder.
You were then invited to speak at the Conservative Party conference in 2010, which a lot of people were very surprised by, given that, then emerged that you had this Socialist Workers' Party past. What did you think when you were sort of put on a pedestal by the Tories?
Well, I mean, I wasn't really on a pedestal. I was speaking with some other teachers, and there'd been some nurses and doctors who'd spoken before us, and we just spoke to the whole. The reason why it seems like I was on a pedestal is because the things I said, and because the audience liked what I said, they gave me a standing ovation.
And you talked about a culture of excuses and
Yes.
how the system is broken because it keeps poor children poor.
That's right.
And listening to what you've said so far to me, you stand by that.
Oh, absolutely. And look, it's better than it was. There's no question. It's far better than it was. And we are on a journey of improvement, I hope, in this country. But it does frustrate me when I think that we're spending over 90 billion a year on education and the ways in which actually, without spending any more money at all, we could change things for the better.
But has education had enough funding being put into it in the last few years particularly? I mean, let's just say, since 2010, or has it been starved of resources, as many of your colleagues say?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with that. I mean, head teachers, do need more money in various ways. So, but I'm not sure that's it's not that I would disagree with it. I'm just not sure that's the thing that I would talk about most, right, because I just know that there's so much that we could do with the money that we've got that we're not doing.
Which is about culture and changing the culture, yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you got a standing ovation at the conference, but you also got quite a backlash from fellow teachers. How did you feel about that? You're quite combative, so were you sort of pleased you'd started a debate, or were you a little bit taken aback?
Well, I don't think I did get backlash from teachers. On a public email address I had, I don't know, hundreds of emails from teachers from around the country saying, thank goodness somebody's saying something. Thank you for speaking out. Thank you for telling people that there's a problem with behaviour in our schools, because that was the issue that they were really worried about. Teachers, the number one reason why teachers leave, or the two reasons, because of workload and because of behaviour. That's why they leave teaching. And so I found teachers, look, to this day, I get teachers coming up to me in the street saying, oh, I really support what you're saying. It's so right. It's so right. So I think, look, as ever, I think politicians can often be out of touch with what's happening in the classroom, and decisions can sometimes be made by politicians that are not necessarily the right ones. For instance, the advanced British standard that Rishi Sunak wants to bring out, I cannot understand in what world he is living in. That he's trying to solve a problem that simply doesn't exist. And when I think about the innumerate children and illiterate children, functionally innumerate and illiterate, leaving our schools at 16 when we should be concentrating on them, and he's talking about, but, I suppose his Winchester buddies want to do maths until they're 18. Well, great for you, Rishi Sunak, but the kids I'm teaching, it's totally absurd what they are suggesting. So, like, when you say I'm a Tory pin-up, I'm sure they don't think I am when they hear me say things like that.
But do you think, why do you think he is doing that? Is it because he's in a kind of bubble where, sorry,
That's right. That's right. He's in a bubble. He has absolutely no idea what's going on the ground. And he's not listening to people. He lives in a completely different world, mixing with people who do not, they don't meet my families. They don't meet our children. They don't, and so he just remembers what he wanted. And he thinks, well, I would have quite liked, my friends would have quite liked to have done maths to 18, so that's what I want. He doesn't imagine that all those head teachers across the country who struggle to get maths teachers as it is to take it to 16, let alone then allowing the private schools like Winchester to take because they'll then need to get more maths teachers to teach the kids to 18. So they're gonna take most of them, and then what are the rest of us left with? It's almost as if they don't care. Honestly, I say they, Rishi Sunak, because I have to say, I think the Tories have done quite well with education. Unfortunately now, at this last stage.
Despite the massive churn in the number of education secretaries.
Yeah, that's true. And that is a problem. But I actually think in terms of the changes that they've made, and that did start with Michael Gove, and I think he did a brilliant job. I think they've been okay. I just feel that at this last stage, and I say last stage because I presume the Tories will not be in power later, that Rishi Sunak, as the act of, a dying man, has decided to do this, which just seems completely insane to me.
Well, so presumably then you're rooting for Sir Keir Starmer to become Prime Minister so that Rishi Sunak won't get the chance to enact this change, which it's an aspiration now, isn't it, this A-level change?
Yes, except I do remember working under Labour in those days. But of course, Keir Starmer is a different man. So who knows? I mean, I have no idea what Labour's going to do. I hope very much that they squash this idea of an advanced British standard and realise that they are not helping children like those of mine in the inner city.
Well, are you encouraged then by the fact that, you know, the private schools have reacted with absolute fury to Labour's plans to charge them VAT? Do you see that response as sort of indicative that education policy might be going in the right direction under Labour?
You know, I see it both ways. I can understand why the private schools are annoyed about it. You know, they all talk about these numbers. That means that various children will end up back in the state sector because obviously they need to be educated. And I don't really know what the truth is there.
But
I
you
sort
worried
of
that you're
understand.
going to end up with a bunch of extra kids that, you know,
I don't
put
worry.
strain in state schools?
Oh, no, I'm not worried. I'm just making the point that that's what people say. I do understand why Labour is doing it. I get it, you know. Again, I'm not sure it's the thing that I would concentrate on because there are so many other points to look at. You know, maybe it'd be nice to have children doing maths to 18. Maybe it'd be nice to charge private schools. But there's so much. You know, we need to sort behaviour in our schools. We need to get teachers being the authority in the classroom. We need to get the public to respect our schools and to respect our teachers in a way that I don't think they do. We need to be talking about small c conservative values so that when head teachers try to stop phones in their classrooms and try to hold families to account to make sure they get their children into school, that they're not doing this on their own. Too often head teachers are battling it out there on their own, and it's not fair on them. So those are the things that we should be talking about. But this government certainly is not. I don't know if the next government will. I hope that they do, because those are the things that make a difference to teachers and to children in our schools.
So does Labour have the vote of a small c Conservative?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know how small c conservative they are. And the thing is, what they should realise is that being Labour doesn't mean you cannot be a small c conservative. They could be.
Well, I think a lot of his colleagues would say that Keir Starmer is a small c Conservative.
Is he? Well, maybe I need to look into more about what he says.
Well, let's come back to your story, because you made this speech at the Tory party conference. You were initially asked not to return to the school you were teaching at while they discussed your position. You eventually resigned. I mean, were you worried that you'd sort of derailed your entire career?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was told by people, headhunters and so on, that I would never work in the state sector again. I'd done the unthinkable. I'd spoken at the Conservative Party conference. You can't do that as a teacher. And so I was really worried. And, you know, I was applying for jobs and it was just, I was thinking, what am I going to do? I could have gone to work in the private sector, but I definitely didn't want to do that because I love inner city kids and it's what I've always done and what I know. And so that's why I decided to end up setting up my own school, which of course took 3.5 years because there were so many detractors trying to stop us from opening. And we had parents' evenings where people would be bussed in from outside of London. They would stand outside with posters, placards saying Tory teacher. They would shout insults at me. We had to hire bouncers in order to protect us because we thought that violence might ensue. All these mums from the local markets who I would have given the flyers to, like when we were looking in Brixton, all these black mums were sitting in the audience, and all of these white people who had been bussed in from outside of London would sit amongst the black mums and then stand up and shout at us to stop me from being heard by these mums. And I kept thinking, sorry, so you people are on the left telling me that you're trying to make a better world, and yet you're stopping these mums who have far less than all of you coming from your nice suburb houses to come into inner city London to stop them from having another choice of school that they're desperate for their children. You know, it was so outrageous, really. And we moved from place to place. First we tried in Lambeth, then we tried in Wandsworth, then we eventually ended up in Brent. The building that we were trying to get in Brent was sold out from under us. The building we tried to get in Lambeth, again, sold out from under us. And each time, I mean, I give assemblies on this all the time. I say, they knocked me down, but I picked myself up and I kept on going. And that is what each and every one of us has to do. Because, you know, of course there are obstacles in life like racism and sexism and so on. But the fact is that if all you do is tell the black boy that you're black and you're never going to get anywhere because the white man is against you, then he's never going to get anywhere. What you do instead is you empower children children. You empower them by teaching them traditionally, by giving them small c conservative values around personal responsibility, and you work hard. That is the only way you can make it in life. And so it's not that I deny that there are problems in the world. It's how do we deal with those problems? And if everybody indulges children in victimhood so that they just see themselves as victims against the powerful, the man, the establishment, there's no way that I can make it, then they won't try.
But your critics might say, well, you're denying someone who's a victim of racism or misogyny or whatever, you're not denying them the right to stand up for themselves, but you're trying to sort of minimize the problem. That's what your critics would say. What do you say to that?
Well, I've just said I'm not saying there aren't any problems. I myself, when people come to me and say, would you like to be on our board because we're lacking diversity, I always think, sorry, do you know the things I've achieved? Why are you not asking me to be on your board because of who I am and the things I've done? All they see is my brown face, and that's why they want me on their board. It's not like I haven't experienced these things. I recognize that there is racism, but what am I going to do at that point? I mean, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do something with my life. And you just keep going. If I had seen myself as a victim when I was setting up this school, our school would not exist. So it is not helpful to children to indulge them in that. It doesn't mean you don't recognize that these things exist. You just don't indulge them in victimhood.
But you do give them power to challenge those issues, racism, misogyny?
Well, you know how you challenge those things by getting an education, by knowing your algebra, by knowing your history. And also, that's really important. We sing God Save the King, I vow to thee my country. Our brown and black children belong to this country as much as any white child does. And if we don't encourage them to feel as if they belong to their country and have something to give, know their history. We teach British history, which of course involves black and brown people, and it didn't used to, and it was wrong that we didn't talk about the million Indian soldiers that gave their lives and so on. That was wrong. But it's equally wrong to then teach children to think in these silos of, this is my tribe, I'm black, this is my tribe, I'm Indian, this is my tribe, I'm gay. Look, we are all British together, and we belong to not just our country, but to our school, and we look after each other because we are small c conservatives.
And what do you tell your kids about, the most recent row about racism in the very senior echelons in the royal family? Does that bother your kids? Have they asked you about that? What do you tell them?
Well, we wouldn't really talk about that because we're too busy learning algebra and history and geography.
Does it concern you, though? Have you followed the row?
Oh, well, yes, I have a little bit. Look, black people always talk about I wonder what skin colour he's going to come out as. And I wonder what his hair is going to be like. And my grandmother used to talk about my sister and me all the time about, the different features that we had, because, of course, my father is Indian heritage and my mother is black Jamaican. So, especially when you have a mixed child, we all talk about that. So I just don't see that there's racism when a member of the royal family thought, I wonder what he's going to look like. I mean, it's a perfectly reasonable thing to wonder.
So you think Meghan took offence unnecessarily in the way that you advised your kids not to?
Yes, I do. And I think that if you take offence unnecessarily as an ethnic minority, that holds you back in life. Now, that doesn't mean that... So when they say to me about being on the board, that, for me, I think that's pretty obvious there, that they're not seeing my accomplishments. But I don't hate them for it. And I don't go home crying about it or being really angry about it. I just get on with my life. I might point out to them, I'm more than just a diverse person. Even this idea, a diverse person, the word diverse does not mean what they think it means. And I worry, I tell you what I do worry about. I worry about white people being so uncomfortable about being white that they're unable to just relax and see me as a human being. That as soon as they see me, they think, can I say this? Can I say that? Oh, what's she going to think? If they don't know who I am, And sometimes I sit at a dinner and people don't know who I am, and I say I'm an inner city, headmistress, and some Etonian next to me is awkward and embarrassed, and I have to be saying, it's okay, please speak to me like a normal human being. And that, I think, is because of the culture that we've currently got.
Well, I'll come back to one more aspect of the culture in just a second. But just before we move off your school, I mean, your efforts have been undoubtedly successful. You've retained an outstanding Ofsted rating. 93% of your pupils achieved a grade 5 or above in their English and Maths GCSEs this year. Tell us about the significance of the name briefly, Michaela Community School.
I feel it was 98%, not 93, but anyway, it doesn't matter.
Well, that may be out of date. It was very good. Anyway.
Tell us about the name. Well, we named the school after an old colleague of mine called Michaela. She was from St. Lucia. And just like my parents, she was just old school. And she believed in rigour and discipline. And she thought that children should be children and adults should be adults. And sadly, she died of cancer in 2011. And I only wish she could see the school. She would absolutely love it, because
sure
that
she'd
was
be
what
very
she
proud.
had in her own classroom all those years that she taught.
Well, just finally, before I ask you for advice for other people who want to follow you up the ladder, the government's next week expected to publish new transgender guidance for schools, saying children can socially transition with the consent of their parents in limited circumstances and with appropriate safeguards in place. We were talking about the culture and how you worried that people were scared to say things about race. And in this area too, has this whole area become a minefield? Is this compromise being put forward by the government a decent one, do you think?
Yeah, I do think it's decent. I think that government and successive governments need to involve themselves a lot more in these culture wars to help head teachers. So earlier I said that head teachers can feel a bit on their own. They're having to just sort things out by themselves and fight the general culture that's out there in order to get a small C conservative environment in their schools.
So you've waited too long for this guidance, basically?
Yes, I do think so. Although, it's here, so that's good. Government need to realise that head teachers cannot just do it on their own. They need the support of government. So I very much welcomed the ban on smartphones, for instance, because if head teachers are just doing it because they want it, it's very difficult to fight parents on that. But when the government say that's the case, well, then head teachers are empowered to do what's right in their schools.